Up, my gamers? It's your boy JJ Van Bebe. I am here with Captain Pufferfish and Mundy. Say hello, boys.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
So we are here to do the fourth annual power rankings for the Bidoof Championship Showdown tournament. So this is a thing that we've done at the start of every season where we just go through, look at all the teams, and we just rate them based on our opinion of what we think is the strongest team. Some notes just at the beginning. Uh, these do not generally take into consideration how good we think the person will be at piloting the team. It's just supposed to be a look at the Pokemon and how they're put together and how they're constructed, and how we think that that general pairing is going to come out in terms of strength. Uh, this has no guaranteed effect on the season. I know last season the person who was ranked last was like was 7-0 at the start of the season or something like that. And another thing to keep in mind is that we are not the most knowledgeable Pokemon players in the world. Uh,
Yes.
I I know I myself did not start playing any sort of competitive Pokemon like this until the first season of this league. So we do not necessarily know what we're doing. These are just our opinions. So we could be dead wrong and your team could be fantastic. But this is supposed to just be a good opportunity to get some feedback on your teams, and maybe while the opportunity for trades are still open, maybe make some last minute substitutions before the season gets rolling. So with that, I guess we'll hop right in. We're going to go from the lowest up to highest. So we're going to be starting with Geek Deer. If you want to take it away, Noah.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for that amazing intro, Jay.
Oh, thanks.
Let's start. Yeah, let's start with Reagan's team here. Um, I'll start with what I like about the team. Your Hisuian, Samurott and Sneasler together are gonna pump. If you can get them in at the right time and you can make that kind of switch. They cover each other pretty dang well. And that pairing with Hisuian Bravery as well, completing that core, is pretty solid. There's a couple things. Also pairing with Mew on the team, adding that Psychic type as well, is also really good. Mew can kind of come in, do what you need it to do, whether it's an attacker, if you want to just set up and get out. It's got almost every move in the game, like we all know. So yeah, that is going to be a foundation for your team. And there's a little bit of bulk there between Samurott and Mew. Some of the things that I think needs work on this team and a couple swaps you might make here, Reagan. I don't personally get the point of the Darkrai. I don't necessarily think it fits on this team. I don't really think it does anything for your team that Chi-Yu doesn't do with a Specs Dark Pulse. I think you're kind of adding too many of the same typings. You're sitting with, I think, 3 dark types on your team as is. Darkrai is such a high point mon that you might be able to spend some other way to kind of round out some of your cores. Your team doesn't have a steel or a fairy Pokemon. So maybe something to pick something up sort of like around those lines. Mega Maywall is still on the board, Reagan. Might be a good pickup for your team. It adds that physical threat outside of Sneasler for your team. That your team's kind of lacking in on the physical front. Your team also has a bunch of weaknesses. Ice and ground in particular, 2 of the most popular offensive typings for moves against you. It's looking a little scary. You're pretty heavily weak in both of those, and not a lot of resist. You have a good immunity with Braviary, but outside that, the weakness chart's looking a little lackluster just in those 2 typings in particular. But I'll throw it over to the other boys for some additions to this.
Yeah, so I was looking at Reagan's team as well. I agree with a lot of what Noah said as well. I do see as well a big fairy weakness. So the only resist you have is Cloudshire. So if I were facing your team, I would probably just pick a bunch of fairy type moves and just go ham there. So you might want to consider picking up a fairy resist. The Mega Mywall is definitely a good option. Um, yeah, and also you definitely do need a good ice resist. Because right now the only switch-in you have is Samurott. So maybe like a bulkier ice resist would definitely help you a lot. Um, yeah, your speed tiers are not bad right now. And your hazards are quite good. So you have Mew, Stealth Rock, of course, and Spikes. The Cloudshire, Stealth Rock. And the Samurott Spikes, of course. So your hazards are quite good, but um, also don't really have amazing removal. Have some defogs, but that's a bit about it. So if rocks come up, I think they're staying up, which might be a bit of a problem. Um, so the only thing I can think of to recommend right now is Mega Maywell. It's definitely a good pickup. You could just swap it right in, but it might be worth looking at some other good tanky pivots. Um, maybe not Landorus Therian, but something along those lines that can come in and remove all the hazards and everything. So that's just my thoughts. I'll pass it over to Jay.
Yeah, you'll hear some similar things from me. I definitely think one of the big strengths of this team is the speed tiers. Trying to speed creep against this team is going to be hard. Uh, in the prep phase, teams aren't going to be able to easily outspeed you whenever they want. I think that one of the way I'd kind of summarize the issue I see with this team is that the top end of the team and the middle part of the team kind of disagree with each other in terms of like point value. So Chi-Yu, Darkrai, and Sneasler are all pretty squishy, highly offensive Pokemon. And if you're not going max offensive, you want a good way to support those Pokemon. And I don't think the middle of your team supports the top end very well. I think that the top end of your team is good. I would probably get rid of Chi-Yu and keep Darkrai, honestly, because Darkrai has a bajillion and one options for coverage moves. But the sort of you want some disruption, some way to pivot in effectively, as well as some solid bulk. Um, like maybe switching to a more bulky top end or getting like a bulky water or bulky steel type could really help this team defensively. The better hazard clear would be good. You have Hisuian Samurott and you have like good ways to set up hazards. My suggestion would be to pick yourself up a rapid spinner so that you can keep the hazards you set up with Samurott and get rid of your opponents. And a thing that would be big for this team is a reliable way to trigger Unburden on Sneasler. Uh, Triggering Unburden on Sneasler, I mean, the Unburden is one of the reasons why Sneasler is so high up there. I mean, it obviously is just a great offensive mon by itself, but if you're doing something like a focus sash, you're relying on your opponent basically one-shotting you, and then any priority move is going to finish you off. So if you picked up like a terrain setter that could set off, you pair the terrain setter with the seeds to allow Sneasler to really pop off in the role it wants to, then that would definitely help, uh, in my opinion. And that's all I have to say about that team.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll move on to next up. We have Caden's team. I am the believer in this team. I'll let the other gentlemen in this call here tell you what they don't like about the team. But Caden, this is not a bad team. I think it needs a little work. I'll go into what I like. I think Mega Gardevoir and Iron Valiant together are great. Pairing that with Magnezone is impeccable. Having Magnezone to come in on those steel types and trap them that both Iron Valiant and Mega Gardevoir don't want to face is awesome. I think you have maybe a little too much of each typing in terms of Steel and Fairy. I don't think the Whimsicott's necessarily useful on this team. It does have a couple things that your team needs in terms of Leech Seed and that Prankster. I think you're kind of dipping into the same types a little too much. I think that Magnezone Gardevoir Iron Valiant is definitely going to catch teams off guard. It's going to be hard to prep for. You have an awesome setup, special, and physical sweeper. Paired with Magnezone is awesome. Having Iron Hands in the team, I think, is okay. I think it could be better. I think this team could really use a solid, bulky Groundmon that's not Ursaluna. Maybe picking up something like a Iron Treads or a Landorus might be better for this team. I just don't think Ursaluna can do what you need it to do to take those resists that you desperately need on this team. That ground weakness is pretty brutal. So maybe something like Landorus having another immunity. But yeah, I think that core by its alone put this team in ninth. I think those three together would be very hard to kind of work around when you're fighting it. Yeah, when it's your turn to face this team. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I do agree definitely with the ground weakness. That's a huge detriment to this team, unfortunately. But definitely this team has some really good mons. Like Valiant and Gardevoir definitely carry the game by themselves. That's true. I'm just a little concerned about the speed tiers because Gardevoir and Valiant really are the only fast mons on this team. Because Whimsicott has Prankster that you want to be using instead. So the speed doesn't really matter that much most of the time, unless you're attacking with it. Um, so I'm a bit concerned. Right now, to me, this team looks like it's a Trick Room team, but there's not really a good candidate for running Trick Room. So I'm not sure exactly what the direction with this team is, to be honest. But um, it does definitely have some good mons. Um, yeah, I definitely consider picking up another either flying type or levitate. Um, maybe something like Cress might work, but I'd also want to see more faster mons definitely that um, can get to those higher speed tiers because this meta is going to be a lot faster with all the megas. So maybe some sort of Scarfer at least that can reach those high highs. Um, yeah, that's what I'd be looking for. So I'll pass it over to Jay.
So I have some similar thoughts. I think that some of your top end offensive mons don't necessarily work together. I mean, Iron Valiant and Mega Gardevoir are great, but for example, they share both a poisoned and a steel weakness, and Iron Valiant can counter that a little bit with his fighting typing. Um, but they don't they don't do such a great job of covering the the types the other is weak to. They're both really strong, um, and you have that nice, Iron Valiant can run mixed sets and do great with both. Mega Gardevoir is obviously an incredible special attacker. I don't inherently think there's anything wrong with running Ursaluna on this team, but I think having both Ursaluna and Iron Hands is not great. I think either one of them individually on the team is fine, but having two separate Pokemon that are like, because they both do a very similar thing, right? Where they're the big, bulky, slow Pokemon that has a big health bar, can hit really hard, and is hard to kill. Um, and having a Pokemon like that is great on the team, but having two Pokemon like that can be a bit more challenging because it makes it very hard for you to get up into those upper speed tiers like some of the other guys were talking about. Um, the huge ground weakness is definitely a big one. Having a good way to counter ground mons, I think, would be good on this team. I know that oftentimes the typing gets memed on because it's so bad defensively and offensively, but I do think this is one of those teams that needs a solid offensive grass type because grass is the only type that both resists and is super effective into ground. I would actually highly recommend Zarude on this team. Uh, Zarude is available. It's like 13 points. It's a both bulky and offensive grass type. I think that could do a lot of good here. Your team also has basically no way to get rid of hazards. I don't know if it has a single defogger. Like some of them might, but definitely not a reliable defogger. So if somebody puts out hazards, they're out. Um,
Yeah,
and that can be a big problem.
the Wims is
Uh,
defog.
so the Wims has defog. So that's obviously prankster defog's not bad. Um, but but hazards are definitely an issue for the team. The amount of rock resists you have kind of negates that a little bit. But like if somebody throws down sticky webs on this team and you don't have Whimsicott to like defog, you're never going to be faster than anything. Um, I also think that the Pinchurchin is a little bit of a meme. I think you're better off just running booster energy. It would be better to run booster energy and get the Quark Drive boost once than to run Pinchurchin and be realistically playing with 5 Pokemon. Um, but uh, I do think that this team has a lot of power on it. But I think that bringing it together a little more, I think that you could, because right now you have 10 Mons. I think that concentrating, that, and a lot of your lower tier Mons are not inexpensive. They're 5, 9, 8 points, that sort of stuff. So I think concentrating some of those lower tier Mons into getting like one or two more like mid or high level threats could do a lot for this team. And I'll pass it back to Noah for the next team.
Yeah. So next up, guys, moving right along here, we got Enchanted Wizard. We all rated this team pretty identically. Yeah, I'll go into what I love about this team. There's a very, very solid core that's going to be hard for teams to prep against. And that core is Greninja, Blaziken. Those two together are the Wombo combo. I drafted it and unfortunately couldn't make it work with my team and traded it away last season. Wanted to use these two together so bad. They're so strong. You pairing that with a Tapu Lele as well to boost the psychic moves of that Volcarona can learn and that Mega Glades can have stab on is awesome. A lot of teams are just gonna get one hit if they're not careful, and maybe 6-0'd. I think this team has a lot of potential to 6-0 teams. There's a couple components in this team that I straight up don't understand. I'm a little on the fence about Alomomola. I think it's a good baton pass, wish passer. Outside that, and it being a bulky water, it's kind of. I think Mundy will go into this a little better than I, but it's kind of defeating. I see why you have it on there. It's kind of defeating the purpose of this highly hyper offensive team. Between Greninja, Megaclade, Volcarona, and Blaziken, they're just gonna come in and click moves or set up and click moves. Having that passer kind of slows things down a little bit, which is kind of the opposite you want to do. You don't really have a whole lot of removal. I guess that's why you took Toad Scroll. I don't really think it fits on this team very well. Toad Scroll with Rapid Spin. Outside that, your only things that have defog are Blaziken and Volcarona, and I don't see you running that on either of those mons. Yeah, so yeah, a couple of these things on this team don't work. There's a very solid core in those 5 mons I mentioned. The Ursaluna Blood Moon I don't think fits on this team. I think Ursaluna fits a lot stronger on a more balanced team, which is not, again, what you're playing here and what you're going for with the core that you built. I'd like to see you maybe trade that out for something that would get you more value for this kind of hyper offense kind of team you're kind of aiming for. Speed tiers are very solid. In terms of weaknesses, you're a little ground weak. Your only resist is Toad Scroll. So if you keep that, if you trade that one out, you don't really have any ground resist, which is an issue. A lot of good Pokemon out there with ground and ground stab that's might roll through this team if you're not careful.
Alright, I can take it from here. So, yeah, a lot of what Noah said is definitely true. I'm especially looking at this giant water weakness. That is a very big deal. So water is a very common type. I'm very worried about that. Um, I guess you do have a Alomola that can come in, but it's definitely a threat. Um, Another thing I'm worried about is I think you're taking boots on Volcarona every single game because that gets half health by Stealth Rock, and you do not have an amazing way to remove that. Toad Scroll can come in, but it's not ideal because of the 4 times ice weakness. It's very vulnerable. So I would probably like to see something a little bit more bulky instead of Toad Scroll, like a Landorus. It still does have that 4 times ice weakness, but it's a bit more better defensively, I think, and it has that ground immunity that would be very nice to have on your team, definitely. Um, I definitely this team does have a lot of good offense, that's for sure. Um, the Lele with your core is pretty good. It's just it's hard to come back, I think, if you mess things up with a wrong predict or something. That's the only worry I really have. Um, yeah. Other than that, maybe maybe another pivot as well. So I'm looking at the pivots that do something useful when you pivot out to them. Landers has the intimidate. Um, Nothing else I can think of at the moment, but I'm sure there's other things that are on the table. So, if you need to, you can run AV on Lele. That's definitely a possibility. You might need to consider that. Because Toad Scroll, it can't just do all the special bulk by itself because of that 4 times ice weakness. It's very vulnerable. So, um, yeah, that's about it for me. So I'll pass it over to GJ.
Yeah, I had a very similar thought. I think that one of the big notes I wrote for this team is this team will either win fast or it's going to lose fast. Um, it's and it could just depend on the game, because the offensive core of this team is strong. That is a scary collection of Pokemon, and I certainly don't want to be facing it down. I think one of the big problems is that the rest of the team doesn't necessarily do the job supporting that offensive core that you want it to. Um, One, both because like they don't, the defensive Pokemon on this team don't necessarily specifically compensate for the weaknesses of your offensive Pokemon. Um, so, uh, I would either try to change the middle to support the offensive high end to run more of a balanced team, or go full in on offense and pick up a few more different highly offensive Pokemon that threaten the types you're really commonly weak to. So, you've got a big water and flying weakness. So if you traded away one of your Pokemon that's got a big water flying weakness, like maybe Volcarona, um, and you grabbed like a strong offensive electric type to be a big threat into those water and flying types. I mean, one that comes to mind is Thundurus Therian is still available. Um, I think that could pivot the team into a much more like just go whole hog on the hyper offense, um, and really just round out the super offensive side of the team. I mean, that's very similar to how the team I built works. I think either of those approaches could definitely work, um, but I think that if you slide in a few trades on this team, it it definitely has the potential to be very scary. Um, and I'll pass it back to Noah for our next team.
Yeah. So next up, we got Colonel Panic. Um, this one, I'm gonna leave to the boys for a lot of the good because I rated this team pretty low. I guess I just don't see the vision. There's a couple parts of this team I really like. I think it's mostly synergy on this team, and I know Jay is gonna work with you on kind of reworking this a little bit and rebuilding. Um, what I really do like on this team is the Garchomp Celesteela core. Very, very bulky and cover each other pretty well. And then another mon I really, really love on this team, which we'll see time and time again over the rest of this power rankings video. If you guys pay attention to the ghost weaknesses, it's pretty much on every team across the board. Everyone's got a ghost weakness, and Annihilape's probably the best ghost Pokemon in the draft. So I can see Annihilate doing very well or even being a kill leader. I think just pairing it with the right mon so it can do the things it needs to do to make that happen. Yeah, again, I just think I'm kind of missing the synergy between a lot of these mons. It seems a little random to me. Your speed tiers are not awesome. I'd like to see a little faster Pokemon out of you if you're going to rebuild and rework this team a little bit. You have Quaquaval that can get faster with time, but outside that, you have nothing really crazy in terms of speed. And I'll pass it over to Mundy there.
Yeah, so this team, I don't mind it. Definitely has a few good threats. The Garchomp's definitely gonna hurt. I can tell you that. Nihilape, it's tricky to play with. Definitely can do a lot of damage though. And then Superior is a bit annoying for people to play around, definitely. The things I do like as well, I like the defensive pivots here. I think they're very, very good. The Blissey, the Celesteela, and the Hatterene. So I like that going for you. Definitely to consider is the ice weakness. It's like largely uncovered. None of your defensive pivots actually resist it. And since two of your really good mons really don't like taking that, that's going to be a problem. So also you do have a pretty big fighting weakness. Luckily you do cover that with Annihilate, but Annihilate's he's somewhat bulky, but you don't want to be switching him into like a predict, because you want to get as much of a beating as you can for that Rage Fist. So, um, yeah, what what I'd like to see here probably, you have some decent hazards definitely, um, but I think you're lacking a little bit in removal and maybe some sort of like Wish Passer might be good. Definitely, it would be pretty good to Wish Pass into the Annihilate, that's for sure. And the Garchomp is still decently bulky. And then you can keep your tanks healthy as well. Now Mola is not available, as that's probably the best Wish Passer here, but there's definitely other ones that you could pick up. Um, yeah, that's all I have. So I'll pass it over to Jay.
Yeah. So this team is, I think, a little incomplete at the moment. For those of you who don't know the lore, the pilot of this team's actually my brother, and so plan to work with him a little bit on workshopping it before the end of the trade season. But uh, I, the team is very slow. That's something we're aware of. Um, I definitely think a more reliable rapid spinner would do a lot for this team because this team wants to set up hazards and it wants to keep up hazards. It has like Galvantula for the webs. It has Annihilate to both spin block and block defog with Defiant. It's got Magic Bounce to try and keep hazards off of your side of the field. But a way to more effectively get rid of hazards once they're down would be nice. Quackable is obviously a rapid spinner, but he wants to rapid spinner to set up to sweep. He doesn't want to come in and rapid spin multiple times a game. Something like Iron Treads would probably do a lot better as like a consistent rapid spinner. I also personally don't really like Superior for this team. Grass typing is one of the worst typings in the game. Grass type Pokemon are not necessarily bad, but usually you take grass types when you really need to cover weaknesses. Like if if you're looking to cover like water and ground types. And this team doesn't really have a water or ground type weakness to it. Um, so I don't. So Superior, it's really going to function more of like a disruption Pokemon with like Glare and Leech Seed and Substitute, and being annoying, which I don't necessarily think is the goal of this team. I think trading out your team is also, your top end is much more physically focused. I think trading out Porygon Z, going from because Porygon Z is sort of like a lower tier special sweeper. I think going to something that's a little higher tier would do some favors for this team. I also think that having a better Pokemon for setting up hazards. You have Annihilate is so good at preventing your opponent from getting rid of hazards. You want a good way to consistently set them up, and bouncing back hazards with magic bounce, as much as it is satisfying, is not a consistent way to do that. Um, so getting like a solid way to set up hazards, I also think uh, would do some good for this team. And as a little note, probably should have said this at the beginning, but if anybody wants help workshopping their team, then the three of us are always here. You can always come into the chat. I know I spent like an hour with Connor the other day. And so if anybody wants help workshopping their team, I mean, my brother doesn't get preferential treatment just because he's my brother. So we spread the love amongst all of the subjects in the Bidoof Championship Showdown. Um, but I'll pass it back to Noah for our next team.
Yeah, next on the list, we have Tyler's team, Tyler's Rain team to be exact. This team I wanted to rate so much higher. There's just some teams and some comps and the way that they're going to be run that I just liked a little bit more. We're getting to the point where a lot of these are just interchangeable. 5, 6, 7, and 8 for me. We're all pretty much interchangeable. Looking at Tyler's team, though, this is an awesome Rain team. Your Dragon Fairy Steel Core is great. I love the addition of Skarmory. It was very, very creative move to put Skarmory on this team. You have so many mons that can set spikes and stealth rock. You have so much defog on this team. You have so much bulk. The bulk of our Chaladon and Skarmory alone is pretty awesome, and you have the sweepers to back it up. So Barraskewda with Swift Swim, you get Mega Swampert with Swift Swim, are gonna go crazy on this team, and I can't wait to see how you perform with this. Picking up Klefki, I was a Klefki hater at first. I see the dream. I still wish you could have picked up a slightly better fairy. I don't hate the steel typing, the third steel typing on this team anymore. I think a better fairy might still be doable for your team. I think a few mons could be swapped a little bit. I think the double Swampert is a complete meme, and I think those points could be used a little better. Maybe get yourself something a little stronger that'll add to this very, very scary group of Pokemon. Raikou on this team is another awesome and creative decision that fits so well. Thunder from that thing is awesome. It's got an awesome speed tier that you desperately needed on this team. Adding to that, man, I mean this team has everything. I think I would trade out maybe the Indeedee too. I just don't realistically see you bringing it to a game. I don't think it really works. I think we had an idea of you picking up Tapu Lele before it was sniped from you, and pairing that with Latios is a disgusting core inside of a Rain team. With Luster Purge Latios. But without that, I just don't think Indeedee provides enough to this team by itself where it's valid for you to bring that as one of your 6 mons to your that you're bringing to a game week. But yeah, very, very solid team. I wish I could have rated it a little higher. I really wanted to, but I think you're going to perform absolutely awesome with this team, and I can't wait. Bundy, what you got?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with a lot of what Noah said. Definitely, this is a lot of definitely easy to use mons that are gonna perform well. I think almost no matter what. As long as you have rain up, your team is a lot stronger than I think a lot of the other teams are. Um, yeah, the things I like about this, I like all the steel types that get their fire weakness negated by the rain. Skarmory is just absolutely fantastic at this team because it only effectively has an electric weakness in the rain. So I think that's amazing. Um, so it's also a very, very good defensive wall with defog as well. Um, Definitely, I could see you getting rid of the regular Swampert and the NDD for something better. Um, there's probably something that's special that might be useful. Maybe something with Hurricane and Thunder, but not entirely sure about that. Um, yeah, there's not a whole lot else. Yeah, I think your type spread's pretty good. You definitely cover a lot of your weaknesses. Once you get rid of the regular Swampert, it's going to be a lot better. I'm sure. So, um, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I'll pass it to Jay.
So I think that there's like the core of a very good rain team in here, but I think there's some fringe decisions that I don't think work as well. I think the team is overall very strong. I mean, obviously, Archaldon, Pelipper, Mega Swampert, Skarmory, Barraskewda, Latios, Raikou. These are all great includes in a rain team overall. 10 out of 10. Good job. Second, Swampert, I agree, highly unnecessary. I also really don't like Klefki in this team. Uh, Klefki, I don't think it really works as a fairy mon. It's really just a steel mon because the cool thing about fairy is it's the only type that resists dragon and threatens super effective damage back. But Klefki isn't going to be doing a lot even with super effective damage. And you don't really want to be setting up screens on a weather team. Alolan Ninetales is an exception to that, but setting up screens is not a good use of your turns in the rain, and setting up rain is not a good use of your turns with screens up. And so, both of those things are on a timer. And so those two things, in my opinion, kind of conflict with each other. So I would personally trade out Swampert and DD and Klefki for some other stuff. I think some things that are more tangentially connected to rain teams. I think that one of the problems you can run into with running a weather team is to keep everything within the weather theme, which can make it hard to have some more versatile options. I also would highly suggest picking up Baskia Legion for this team. Adaptability, you throw a choice scarf on it, and pretty much everybody has a ghost type weakness. I think that thing in this team would hit like a brick full of trucks. I think it would be super scary. So that would be a recommendation from me. But yeah, I think that there's a really strong core in this team, but there's a couple of Pokemon that I would not personally ever bring to a game. So I think trading out those for other picks that will go well with it would do better. But that's in my opinion. Let's go back to Noah for our next team.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to mention real quick that we do have a three-way tie for these three places that we're doing: Tyler, Tony, and Mr. Palermo's team here. Uh, yeah, we've rated them very, very differently, especially these two that we're about to get into. But Tony's team here, there's a lot going on, and we were very, very different on this. Tony, your core in Megaladios, King Gambit, and Enamorus is awesome. Probably the best Fairy Dragon Steel core out there. Those three hit so damn hard. I'm a little scared to face it. You have pretty solid speed tiers. Rabambi's kind of holding that ship up a little bit. Um, there's a couple things on the team that I don't necessarily like that Jay I know is going to argue with me about. And I'll I'll try to be as brief as I can on this. I don't think the Lilligant makes any sense for this team. Um, I don't see it. I get you cover that quad flying weakness pretty well, which is great. And your typings just all around are pretty freaking solid. Rock's looking a little scary. You might have to run boots on a lot of these mons that you're not going to want to run it on. Mega Latios in particular, you got a Megastone. So yeah, it's going to take some damage if you don't have a Rabombi or something or a Tentacruel to come in and rapid spin. I think this team is lacking a little bit in offensive pressure in terms of physical attackers, and I think the other guys disagree with me on this. King Gambit with Supreme Overlord wants to come in at the end of the game. Lilligant doesn't make any sense on this team. Everything else in the team fits well. It's just that one mon I think you could swap for something a little better. That leaves Mamoswine having to do a lot, carrying this team on its back in terms of an offensive breaker. King Gambit really just doesn't want to touch the field until the end of the game unless it has to come in and just resist something and force a swap. Yeah, Mamoswine has to do a lot here, and I just don't think it has the capability with that 80 speed to do what you need it to do. There just isn't a fast enough physical sweeper on this team for you. I don't know if it needs to change because Jay apparently thinks this is the best team, and I'll throw it over to those guys. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, alright. Yeah, definitely I agree this is a bit special heavy. I think on this team, you have to run King Gambit every single game, and you don't have a choice. Um, because there's a few reasons why. Because you need a sword stance sweeper physically. You don't really have much. There is the Mamoswine, but you really need to apply pressure. I definitely think you can run Defiant, especially if someone has Intimidate. But yeah, I don't know. The Gambit definitely it's risky because of that quad weakness to fighting. So you just have to be really really careful when you bring it in. Definitely. Um, I I also agree that it's weak to rocks. There's not really great ways of getting rid of it. Maybe a couple defogs, but yeah. I'd prefer to see like a more tanky um defogger or rapid spinner here. Especially because you're not a super duper fast team. Um, but yeah. Also, the other thing is you definitely are somewhat poison weak. Especially you're not bringing Bronzong every game, and I think that that's one of the reasons why you're forced to take King Gambit every game because of that poison weakness. Um, yeah, I think that's about it for me. So I'll pass it over to Jay.
Yeah, I could not disagree more. I love this team. If there was any team like if I looked at all 12 teams and somebody was like, "Hey, you have to choose one of these teams to run," I would choose this team. I think that this team has literally every single tool you want. There might be a few exceptions, but in terms of like getting the most you want out of the Pokemon you have, I think it's great. I mean, Mega Latios, King Gambit, and Amorous Incarnate are going to be brutal. And each of them can do different sorts of things. Latios has a super diverse move pool. King Gambit can run the Supreme Overlord, or it can run the Defiant. It can run bulky sets. Those knockoffs hurt. An Amorous can be a contrary sweeper. You can choice item it. Rotom has all sorts of disrupt. It can throw out Will-O-Wisps and things like that. Mamoswine has great priority, two of the best offensive typings. I mean, we've seen Mamoswine perform well. As far as ways to get rid of hazards, Tentacruel for a bulky rapid spinner. I do not understand the Lilligant. I don't know if I mean, I also don't know that Pokemon very well, so it could just be I don't understand the vision. Um, but that's the one that I'm not really certain about. Rabombi, we've seen do really well. It can lead, set up webs. It can sort of it can play that early game really well of like setting your team up for success. Bronzong for a bulkier steals type, and Moltres Galar is sort of a sort of runs that like special defense as well as like a the berserk ability. I think that this team, I do think that after you get past this top end, I do think the team can struggle a little bit with like raw power, but it's like if I imagine the idea of like the balance team, like this is what I would imagine the balance team. And I know like these days fully offensive is usually stronger than straight balance, but I like this team. I think it's very well put together. And I think that it it has all the tools you need to prep against your opponents in each game. I might trade out Lilligant for something else, like maybe a sturdier defogger, um, or something that can counter your other weaknesses. But overall, I love this team, and I think it's I personally think this team is going to be the redemption arc of the dual weather team. I think that this team is going to do great, and I look forward to seeing it. Um, but yeah, I'll pass it back to Noah for the next team.
All right, moving on to one of my favorite teams drafted this season. Mr. Palermo's team here is freaking awesome. I love this team. It needs some work, but the skeletal structure of this team is outrageous. The raw power between Galarian Slowking, Kyurem, and Weavile in particular, plus Mega Medicham is outrageous. Your speed tiers are solid. You're a little fire weak. I'd like to see maybe another resist out of you, and I'll tell you maybe some mons to switch out. And I'm so willing to work with you to help make this team absolutely unstoppable because the pieces are here. We just need a couple mons to support Kiro and Weavile and Galarian Slowking here. That rock weakness is rough. There's no two ways around it. So yeah, maybe picking up some resist here and there wouldn't hurt. Adding Chandelure to this team is a very creative solution to the weaknesses that you have on this team. Having that immunity to fighting and having the resist to both steel and fairy is awesome. I don't think the Galarian Articuno makes sense here. You're fighting Psychic Dark Core is there. The Galarian Articuno is lacking. It's not that great of a mon in my opinion, and I think you could rework a couple of these Pokemon and find something a little better. I don't see the Ferrothorn doesn't necessarily fit in my book. It's a good bulky mon, but this team could so easily pivot to just incredible hyper offense where Ferrothorn's not necessary, even as a spike setter. If maybe I don't think Weezing is a really good fairy type, or the Galarian Weezing is a really good fairy type either. I think just a couple mons reworked here will make this team absolutely unstoppable. Galarian Slowking also being able to use Chili Reception and power up Kyurem and Weavile, a physical and special sweeper that can both set up, is absolutely disgusting. And this team is going to be very, very, very hard to beat. It just needs a few tweaks, and that's why I rated it so high. I base this on the potential of this team because this team can be absolutely devastating. I'll pass it over to the other guys though.
Yeah. My rating is the exact opposite of Noah. I'm basing it on how this team looks right now. So right now, there's a lot of redundant typing, unfortunately, aside from ghost types, and that's leading to a lot of your common weaknesses. Like you have a bunch of rock, ghost, and dark weaknesses, unfortunately. So I would try to diversify your typing a bit. But the mons you have are really strong definitely the Soul King Galar, the Ferrothorn, the Medicham, and the Kyurem are extremely good Pokemon. So I think you could definitely take those and build something around that. Um, yeah, your team is also decently fast. Um, maybe what it's missing, is maybe like one more Scarfer or something that runs Choice Band or Choice Specs. Um, yeah, but also you don't really have a amazing hazard removal, I think. Maybe you could run a defensive Kyurem with the fog, and that's okay, but there's probably a better Mon you can be running as a defogger or a rapid spinner. Um, yeah, so that's all about it for me. So I'll pass it over to Jay.
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of say a little bit of a combination of what the two of them were saying. The offensive core in this team is terrifying. Kirim, Slowking, Galar is a horrifying combo. Slowking Galar is one of the best defensive Pokemon in the game. Kirim is, I mean, it has the stats of a, box cover legendary and the ice typing, which is generally considered to be the best offensive typing in the game. Uh, that's a nutty combo. Also having Weavile, which can run more physical sets and gives you like a premier knockoff user, is nice. I don't necessarily like the repeated ice type in your top tier Pokemon, but it, obviously getting the benefit from Slowking Galar setting up is great. Uh, I also think that Mega Metachan is like another big offensive sweeper is great. I think that offensive core for this team fantastic. And I think the rest of it really lets that core down. I don't think Articuno or the Wheezing help much with this team, in my opinion. I also think the Hydreigon is very redundant. Weavile gives you a grass typing, Kyurem gives you a dragon typing. It does give you a more special option, but it's super redundant typing. Um, there's like a couple of recommendations that are there's a couple of really common draft league recommendations that I would personally suggest. Something like bringing a bulky water type is almost always great for a draft. I think the water type Tapu is available, and it can also give you that Misty Surge if you really want the Misty Surge off the Wheezing. I think that you could use to have a better ground type. Alolan Dugtrio as your ground type is not ideal. Ground is another great offensive typing. And it was especially, if your opponent has like offensive rock type Pokemon, which your team would really struggle with, um, a good ground type is going to help a lot with that. Um, I also think that if you have a lot of ghost weaknesses like this team does, having a normal type for that immunity is gonna do some good overall for the team. But yeah, I think that making some changes around the edges, I think like 2/3 of this team is great. I think if you change out 2/3 of this team, then, and I think that's kind of what Noah's rating is based off of. Then Noah will be right. I'd highly suggest reaching out to one of us, getting some ideas for some changes. Another option is you could also lean more heavily into the idea of doing a snow team. I've Alolan Ninetales is still available. There's a
Has
bunch of
not been
good
picked. Yeah,
yeah,
it'd be
there's a
so
bunch
easy.
of good Pokemon with Slush Rush. Like, the you can reach out to Winterborn about that. He ran a snow team last season. It can be a great option, and you have the parts for a great snow team. So I think that like this team has the potential to be a top tier threat, but I think as it stands now, it doesn't have the tools to round out the offensive core for you to be able to consistently, prepare for games and beat teams. Um, but overall, like scary combination of Pokemon. They synergize very well in the core of it. But I'll pass it back to Noah for our next team.
Oh my god, I love that team. All right, moving it over to Monday, old buddy, old pal. I don't think I need to tell you what I what I hate about your team. I think You've done enough of that. But I'll tell you what I like about the team. Um, this Grassy Surge team is freaking awesome. That light pickup of Volcarona is flawless for your team. I'm glad I suggested it. It covers your two main weaknesses in fire and ice perfectly. Quad resisting both of them. Your potential for setup on this team is it's got to be the best in the draft. The setup potential on this team between Kartana, Halucha, Gliscor, Raging Bolt is awesome. And they all do things very, very differently. Your speed tiers are pretty decent. Kartana is going to absolutely blow through teams. If you just got to find the right time to send it in. One thing in particular I just didn't like in this team. I know we talked a little about this right before we started recording here. A knockoff into your team or any dark move is pretty free. Your only resist is Halucha with Unburdened, so its item is going to be consumed before you get the chance to knock it off. So really, you don't have any awesome resists for this team in terms of dark. Rock's a little rough, not too bad. You cover it okay. I think every team's getting a little rock weak on top of Ghost. So it's kind of a common theme I'm seeing, looking more into these teams. Raging Bolt on this team is beautiful. Trying to get you to trade it away from me so your team's not so strong. I know you got sniped a couple times. I know you really wanted a bulky water, but picking up Volcanion I think is going to accomplish a lot of what you were looking for in Alomomola, and just taking those hits that you need it to take. But I'll let you talk a little bit about the theory crafting, what went into this team.
Yeah, so basically the gist of it is I want to use Kartana. So this is the best way to do it, I found out. Using a grassy terrain team, boosting, of course, Kartana's grass move. And I really like the core with Kartana, Halucha, and Rillaboom. I think it's pretty nice. It might be a little difficult for me to prep every week because I'm very physical heavy in that core. But that's something I'll have to figure out. Um, yeah, Halucha is very scary, I think, in grassy terrain because of the grassy seed on Burden with Swords Dance, and it's a flying fighting mod, so I think that's gonna be definitely my kill leader this season. So watch out. Then I'm
If
looking.
it's not, I'd be concerned.
And I'm looking forward to the Raging Bolt. There's a lot of sets I can use for it, and I think it's pretty fun. So yeah, I have a lot of tools. I'll see. Maybe I'll switch something out, but this is looking fine for now, I think. So I'll see what Jay thinks about my team.
Yeah, I really liked this team. I think I rated it higher than either of them did. I mean, the team's got good breakers. I mean, now that I've heard you said it, the strategy of saying I want to run Kartana, let's see how to do that, not a bad strategy. Um, I think that strategy is like called, you choose a monarch where you pick a Pokemon and then you just build around it. Um, but great breakers, Kartana can absolutely just run through a team. You've got good setup, Raging Bolt, Halucha. You've got good choice users. Entei, Volcanion are great options to put a choice item on. I do think that the team relies a little too heavily on Gliscor for taking care of hazards. Which, I mean, Gliscor does really well, but it's kind of the only Pokemon that does it. One thing I do really like about this team is that you have a bunch of ground weaknesses and then you cover them really well. So this is like an example of when I talk about like Pokemon working together well. You're going to want to bring ground Pokemon into this team for those 4 ground weaknesses for good Mons. But if you do that, like Kartana and Rillaboom are just going to be huge threats into those. Volcanion is going to be a huge threat to that if it's Choice Scarfed and can outspeed those ground Pokemon. Um, I don't think having both Volcanion and Entei is necessary. I also, having run Slowking last season, he's not as bulky as you think he is. Being a psychic type, not a great defensive typing. Being weak to knockoff and U-turn is really not fun. So I don't think it's going to be able to reliably bulk for you. But in general, I think the team's really well put together. I think you got the best 1-point Pokemon in the Dops himself. And yeah, I think this team's going to do really well. I'll pass back to Noah.
Oh man, I get to talk about my own team now. I wanted to rate my team a little higher. I was stuck between 3, 4, and 5. Went the modest route, put myself at 5. There's some weaknesses in my team, but I'll kind of go into the theory crafting and what I love about it. I really wanted to make a sand team originally. I really couldn't figure out how to do it with the points that I was allotted, which is crazy because I chose how many points we were allotted to start with. So yeah, so I ended up I wanted to make a Garchomp team from then on out, and I found a pretty nice core that pairs with Mega Lopunny. Garchomp also makes an awesome defensive core with Scizor and Rotom Wash. Between those three, it is very, very hard. They both Scizor and Rotom Wash can slow pivot, take a hit, and put in Garchomp safely to do what it needs to do, whether it's an Earthquake or setup. Nihilego and Megalopunny together kind of are my heavy hitters in terms of special and physical prowess. Those two pairing pretty well together. They're kind of similar stat-wise. Obviously, one being special, one being physical. They do a lot of the same thing, but also a little different. Picked up the Grimmsnarl, not super sure on that one. Really wanted screens. Again, I know I'm kind of leaning heavy in hyper offense here. I didn't really have an awesome way of dealing with water types outside of Rotom Wash. So having a Grim that can set screens and Rotom Wash can take the hits it needs to, and especially against other types, because it's one of my only physical mons outside, I guess, Scizor, that can just take hits effectively and kind of have some breathing room to kind of do what I need to do and get in there and sweep when the opening presents itself. In terms of weaknesses, yeah, water's my main one. A good water Pokemon on a team that I'm prepping against is definitely going to take some creativity, which is kind of why I have the glue that's holding my team together in Azelf. Azelf is absolutely perfection for this team. It can defog. It has a very reliable energy ball that can deal with those water types if Rotom Wash can't use a Thunderbolt or if it's been knocked out. It can fast pivot along with Cinderace. It really does everything I needed to do. It's a good psychic type that I was kind of lacking in to complete my core. It just kind of fit it fit like a puzzle piece kind of to what my team was lacking in. Garchomp, very, very scary. I expect to see my kill leader kind of come in late game and just sweep. Get in early, get out, then come in at the end of the game. Megalopunny, if won decent season 1, it was Snipe from awesome speed tier. Has Scrappy, can hit ghosts, hits every type in the game for at least neutral damage. Yeah, it's kind of a monster. Very excited to use that. I'm borderline fairy heavy, fairy weak, sorry. But I have Cinderace, one of the best fairy counters with Libero Gunk Shot. And it's pretty freaking fast, so I'm very happy I got to pick that one up. But yeah, that's kind of my team. I have a Grafaiai in there. Just might not bring it to every game, but I have it just to kind of, I guess, scare some people off in team building. That hey, I may bring it, and encores and taunts and stuff, and will-o-wisps here and there might cripple you if I decide to bring it 1 or 2 weeks. But Monday, what do you think? You rated my team higher than I did.
Yeah,
tell me what you love about it.
I definitely think it has some scary elements. Definitely the Mega Lopunny, it can be very punishing if you're not predicting well, because it's just gonna keep hitting you and then going back out. So you're gonna have to play around that definitely. The Mega Garchomp definitely is gonna be pretty good. I'm sorry, regular Garchomp is definitely gonna be pretty good. That rough skin, the free Rocky Helmet is pretty nice. Um, there's definitely a lot you could do with this. The main worry I have is I want a Nasty Plot or Calm Minesweeper. Because right now you don't really have anything like that. It's you have the Beast Boost and Neolego, but not really much else. Um, so maybe like a Latias or something similar to that. That can boost up and just win the game. Because you're quite an offensive team, so if you run into a special wall, you really need a way to break through that. That's the one thing I'm worried about. So, yeah. Uh, unfortunately there aren't too many special mons left, but I'm sure you can find something. So, yeah. I'll pass it over to Jay.
Yeah, I think that I am not personally a big fan of this team. Um, Starting off, I do think the team has great physicals, great physical attackers. Obviously, Garchomp is an incredible setup mon. Scizor is a great setup mon. You've got good pivot options. But as far as like specially offensive Pokemon, you're kind of your big hitters are Azelf and Nihilego, and neither of them are good offensive typings. Um, Psychic is, we're not in Gen 1 anymore, unfortunately, as much as we all love the Psychic types thematically. Psychic is really not the best typing. And Poison is a great typing, but defensively. It's going to really demolish people's opposing fairies. But other than that, it's only super effective against grass. And so it would not be my choice of a special offensive sweeper. I think one thing that's great about this team is it is fast. This team is faster than most of the teams. Over half of its Pokemon are over 100 speed. This team is almost certainly going to outspeed you. Um, I don't love the Grimmsnarl on this team. When you're setting up screens, you want to make sure you have something valuable to do with that screen, because setting up screens, you lose a bunch of momentum. And so, I mean, basically the play I imagine is you do screens, you parting shot into Garchomp, and then you try to set up with it, which can work great. But in order to do that, you need to get rid of your opponent's fairy types to, you know, in order for the scale shot to work. And then, obviously that's what you have the Nihilego for, but you got to make sure that the opposing fairy types are, and I just think I don't think it fits well enough with the whole team. Grimmsnarl is obviously great. And I mean, you could just run it as like a Prankster disruption Pokemon, but Rotom Wash also is a great disruption Pokemon. And if you really want Prankster, you also already have Grafaiai. But I definitely think um, there's some good aspects to this team, but I think it needs stronger, especially offensive threats in order to like be a solid offensive team. And that's it from me. So I'll pass it back to Noah.
Yeah. Who do we got next on here? Jay's team. Look at us just going down the line. All right. Jay, I've been up and down about this team. You made a lot of trades.
I did make a lot of trades.
A lot of them. Tapu Koko is the obvious foundation of this team. You with your tricks with your Zapdos, I would love to see you perform well. This team, I have to side with Mundy a little bit. This team is Rock Week, and Empoleon being your only resist, kind of puts too much pressure on Empoleon because of what it's trying to do and be that bulk that you need it to be. I feel like you almost you almost have to bring it to like a lot of your games, or almost all of your games. Um, Outside of that, this team's offensive pressure is insane. You've taken that damn Volbeat again. That's just gonna pass to any one of your sweepers and just destroy teams. Is gonna happen. If you don't know how that Volbeat works, go back and watch last season's replays. There's plenty of content there. Um, the Meowscarada, Iron Moth, Landorus Incarnate, Zapdos. There's so much offensive pressure here, and the Mega Scizor to boot. You got the better Scizor. Congratulations. Um,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I mean, you cover the quad weaknesses pretty well outside of rock. But your quad rock weakness is Masquerain, so I'm not too worried about that. Um, you cover U-turn incredibly well, so Meowscarada having that quad weakness is almost ignored. Not a lot of people are going to bring a whole lot of U-turn against you, unless they're a pivot team like me. That kind of has to. Freaking solid team. Picking up that lantern for the water absorb definitely helps. Um, yeah, very, very, very solid team around. There's nothing terrible about this team. I could have rated it a little higher. Just the couple I rated higher than it, I just like the comp a little more to my playstyle. I guess that's kind of what it seemed. This isn't something I would draft, but I think you're going to find an incredible amount of success with the team. But I'll pass it to Mundy because he rated this team pretty high as well.
Yeah, I definitely think this is one of the best teams for sure. It's very threatening offensively. Definitely has a lot of pressure. So, yeah, like Noah was saying, the one concern I really have for this team is the rock weakness. I think it's going to be pretty exploitable. As Noah was saying, you kind of have to bring a Empoleon every game. There are other options like Coco and Zapdos can defensively run a defensive set and have Defog, but it's really not ideal. Um, so I'm just a little bit worried about this team being predictable. And if he ever doesn't bring in Empoleon, then uh, they might have a problem. So yeah, we'll see. The Mega Scissor is very threatening, of course. With the Swords Dance, Bullet Punch, Close Combat, um, it's really hard to beat that for sure. And then of course Zapdos with the multitude of sets that you could bring. There's screens, there's defensive Rocky Helmet. Of course, the static ability is extremely good. Can catch someone on a predict that can has that 30% paralyzed chance. That's brutal if that ever hits you. So, um, yeah, definitely like this team a lot. Um, yeah, just worried about the rocks. So, yeah. All right, I'll pass off to Jay.
Yeah, so this is very different from the teams I usually draft. Uh, I tend to draft more balance or defensive teams that like to do lots of maneuvering and gain like steady advantage. This team is not that. This team is hyper offensive, and very fast. I think the only team that's faster in it than it, as I think, is Noah's, and that's before you even consider like the Quark Drive, Speed Boost. Um, but in general, my team is probably faster than yours, and the
Yeah.
threats hit hard, and they pair well together. Um, you know, uh, Obviously, a big part of the challenge for this team for me was building a team with Tapu Koko that wasn't ground weak. And unfortunately, I think of like the 8 Quirk Drive Pokemon, only 3 of them aren't weak to ground, and 2 of those are Iron Valiant and Iron Bundle, which were both taken in the first round of picks. So like one of the big challenges was building this team without being too weak to ground. I think it does it pretty well. Um, uh, it's one of the nice things about Tapu Koko is that the team doesn't really need to be an electric terrain team for Tapu Koko to be good, because Tapu Koko is just already good by itself as a draft Pokemon. A lot of the Pokemon can run a diverse array of sets while still being incredibly threatening. Um, And a little fun fact about this team that I just personally like: every single Pokemon on this team can pivot. Every single one of them gets a pivot move. So the goal for this team is to threaten offensively and never lose momentum by continuously pivoting to sort of always have the optimal threat out. And we'll see if I can pilot it. I think that I'm not as worried about the Rock's weakness. I mean, Zapdos is a great defogger, Empoleon's a great defogger. It might end up being more of an issue than I think it is. I think that this team doesn't want to spend too much time clearing rocks. I think if my opponent is taking the time to set up rocks, I think I want to be taking advantage of that to gain positive momentum. But beyond that, I think it's a good team. It'll be a learning experience to try and pilot, and I'm excited for the season to play with. So yeah, I'll pass it back to Noah.
All right, next up, my highest rated team, the Sun God, Connor, built an absolutely beautiful fire Sun team here. A lot of switches from Connor as well. But I think he landed on a winner here, and I'll go through why. Connor, you switching your setter to Mega Charizard might have been the best decision in terms of trades. That the offensive pressure that thing brings is ridiculous. Being able to set up and do the things it needs to do. The amount of offensive pressure and speed that comes with this team is perfection. Having Venusaur and Lilligant with Chlorophyll is beautiful. Those two are going to get in, get fast, and just roll through teams. You having the amount of fire stab that you have is awesome. The reason I rated this team number one though is the amount of defensive mons and how they really pair with this team. Some maybe Jalen will argue against this, but I'm not sure. I think your two steel mons in Heatran and Corviknight, you taking those two first, was an awesome play for a Sun team. Corviknight and Heatran together is insane. They have zero shared weaknesses between the two. They both do incredibly different things. Heatran can be special attacker, and it can be super defensive to pair with Corviknight and Toxapex. You picking up Great Tusk was perfection. You were very, very, very weak to rock. You're still a little weak, which is one of the few downsides of this team. But having that quad resist is something that your team needed, and having such an awesome mon in photosynthesis as well is an awesome swap on your part. The power of Victini V create, Walking Wake just drowning things with Hydro Steam. Ogerpon being a very fast setup sweeper with Swords Dance. I mean, I have issues. I'm having issues trying to find faults in this team in just terms of the Pokemon. The typings are kind of what get you. In terms of your weaknesses, just that rock weakness kind of hurts a little bit. But yeah, this team is almost flawless in my opinion. But I'll let the other guys get into it. I guess just one quick weakness for you, Connor. Just thinking logistically about the Charizard a little bit. Having that quad weakness to rock. If you're not, I mean, you setting Sun turn one isn't really the issue. Just having to reset Sun might be an issue for you because it's a Mega and you can't run Boots. So it losing half its health to some Stealth Rocks is gonna hurt you. And if Great Tusk can't spin those away, you're gonna run into some issues. So you're basically forced to spin on Tusk before you can even reset your weather. So that's probably the biggest downside about this team. But I'll throw it over to the boys.
Yeah, so I have a bit of a different perspective on Charizard Y. If you didn't know, he still has Roost, so he can just literally roost back up the Stealth Rock's damage. It's a huge benefit. But I don't think you'll have too much of a problem with Stealth Rocks because you have Tusk and Corviknight both. That can get rid of them pretty easily. So, and also on turn one, I believe Charizard also has Defog. It's not ideal to run, but you can run it. There's a lot of scary mons on this team. The 150 base power V create and Sun is terrifying, especially with Choice Band. Not looking forward to that.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. The Tusk was a really good pickup, definitely. Let's see if you can use it better than I was. So I'm sure it's going to be a lot better in Sun. Definitely a lot of sets you can run on that thing. So quite interested to see how you're going to use it. Um, Definitely the only concerns I have really about this team, yeah, it is rock weak. I'm more concerned about rock type moves than I am about Stealth Rock because of your amazing hazard movers. But it also is flying weak. So your pivots are resisting that, but it's just something to consider. Um, but yeah, you definitely do have a lot of power in this team, and your pivots are very, very, very good. So yeah, definitely gonna be difficult to beat this one. I'm not looking forward to playing it. So yeah, I think that's about it for me. I'll pass it to Jay.
Yeah, so I mean, I know that you've heard a lot of what I have to say about this team, Connor, because we talked directly about the team. Um, but I do think that this team, I think it's very strong, and I definitely like it better after the changes. But I do think it has some reasonable weaknesses. I don't think that picking up Charizard as your Sunsetter is an objective upgrade. I think it's a strong decision that has its drawbacks. Uh, it, obviously you can't run boots on it, but another big drawback to Mega Charizard Y is that you can't bring the weather extending stone on it. You can't bring Heat Rock, which means you get a lot fewer turns of Sun on this team by having Mega Charizard Y. Now, it also means that your Sunsetter is in and of itself a huge threat on this team and doesn't even necessarily need to switch out. But if you bring it in one turn, it gets Sun up. Then you have 4 turns after that. If the next turn you're switching out, then you get 3 turns of Sun on whenever Pokemon you're using next, um, which might be enough. But it takes away a little bit of the versatility of being able to change what you want to do. I do agree that Heatran and Corviknight pair excellently together. They're a fantastic combination of Pokemon. Great, sort of defensive, bulky core. Um, but running Corviknight on a Sun team, I do think obviously has a little bit of drawback. Those fire type moves going into Corviknight. Now, if you catch the predict and you get the flash fire on Heatran, that's great. But if Corviknight gets hit by them, then that sucks. I think that the Victini is gonna be fun. You're gonna one shot a neutral Mon at some point this season with Victini, and it's gonna be awesome. Um, you're going to hit that choice band V create in the sun, and something that's neutral damage, a bulky neutral damage, is going to go down in one hit. I'm going to love to watch it. I think that Great Tusk was a great pickup, both as another way to abuse the sun, as well as it is definitely a rapid spinner that can come in repeatedly throughout a game. So if you need to get rid of rocks over and over again, Great Tusk can do it. But you are going to need to get rid of rocks over and over again because every time you want to set up your weather, you're going to want rocks gone. You can, you know, roost back up, but if you're roosting back up, that's another turn of the limited sun you have that you're spending roosting. I think taking a bulky water in Toxapex that doesn't really require offensive water moves is a great idea for your bulky water. I think that bringing as many photosynthesis mons so you have alternative ways to abuse the weather is great. I personally don't think Ogre upon Hearthflame adds enough to your team. Um, I mean, obviously, the boosted fire attacks are great, but Victini brings in the boosted fire attacks. I just don't think it brings anything new to your team. Um, But I do think overall the team is very strong. It's going to hurt a lot. Um, I personally think that either you should switch to be less reliant on Sun a little bit, or maybe even pick up a second Sun setter so that if you have a game, because there will be games where you will want all 8 turns of Sun, picking up a second weather setter so that you can bring that instead of Mega Charizard might help the team be more consistent. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this team, and I'll pass it back to Noah.
All right. The final team and the highest rated team this is Winterborn. Oh man, I hate this team. Oh, this is going to be the worst to play against. Absolute torture. Word of the wise, if you don't bring Defog or Rapid Spin, you lose to this team. There is no two ways around it. The amount of hazards and reliable hazards on this team is insane. Lamora, Tinglu, Pecharunt in particular is ridiculous. The amount of status you can apply on this team, Pecharunt, Regieleki, Mega Banette, it's baffling to me how much this team has going for it. You have a great bulky water in Dondozo. You have awesome offensive pressure and fast offensive pressure because Zapdos Galar is going to want to be scarfed a lot of the time. So you got very fast there, and Iron Bundle's fast enough as it. So good special and physical breakers there. The really only downside to this, man, Mr. Winterborn, is your typing weaknesses. You're pretty weak to ice and ground in particular. Those two are gonna might be a little exploitable, and that might be the only way to break through this team. There's some solid setup on this team. You got Prio and Metagross. I mean, there's a lot going for this team. You're just gonna get bombarded with hazards and status, burns and toxics and thunder waves, and this is gonna be an incredibly hard team to prep for, and an incredibly hard team to beat this season. You have decent, really, really solid speed tiers all around. Even your speed tiers below 100 are pretty good. A lot going for this team. Draining Kiss Comfy is honestly pretty solid by itself, but with this team, I mean, it's just another layer of stuff you're going to have to deal with. Pass it to Mundy. What do you got, man?
Yeah, so this team is pretty terrifying. Caleb has every kind of hazard. You got the rocks, the spikes, and the poison spikes. And then after you're done with all that, the bundle or the Reggie comes in and finishes off all your mods. So if you can't get rid of hazards immediately, you're gonna have a bad time. And he's also got some beefy pivots, definitely, that are very, very good. Dondozo, that's unaware. The Tinglu that has that a special attack
Ruination.
decrease, yeah, and Ruination as well. It's gonna be hard to get through those, definitely. Um, a lot of good mons here, definitely. The Penturchin is very good because it has a very good status in Malignant Chain. And then he has the Banette for the Prankster Will-O-Wisp and Destiny Bond. So that's gonna be interesting to play around. Then yeah, we'll see. Um, yeah, but just a note, please do bring a lot of removal for hazard this against this guy. So yeah.
Please.
All right, I'll pass the final response back to Jay.
I'll start off with saying it's a trap. Don't listen to either of them. They're leading you astray. The moment you try to get rid of hazards, guess what? Either Pecharunt or Defiant Zapdos is gonna come in. So if you Rapid Spin, he's gonna bring in a Ghost type to block it, and if you Defog lowers evasiveness, so it triggers Defiant. Uh, so a word to the wise before you try to clear those hazards, because he has ways of punishing you for even trying. Uh, this team has great, obviously it sets up those hazards. It protects it with by punishing you. If you rapid spin into Petramont, then you're just losing a turn. If you defog and he predicts and switches to Zapdos, then now his Zapdos has basically got a free sword stance off. So that's really fun. If you try to, he's stalling. Oh, well, I'll just try to set up hazards back on him. Well, he has Regieleki, and even if Regieleki only gets rid of hazards once, how much do you want to be fighting over trying to put hazards up? Um, it's gonna be able to help him control hazards, especially around the early game, which is when it has the most impact. And generally, if you're playing against a stall team, you want to try to find a passive Pokemon to set up on to break through it. But guess what? He has a Pokemon with Unaware. You switch in a Pokemon to try and set up, but then Dondozo's just gonna come out and sit in front of you. Um, so I think this team it's strong. It's got a cohesive strategy that it's going for, and a lot of the Pokemon on the team really help fit into that strategy. I will say that stall is just a harder strategy to play, and it uh especially with how many strong offensive Pokemon, it can be more difficult to operate. It tends to be weaker than offensive strategies. That being said, um, Winterborn is, I think, definitely the most experienced Pokemon player uh, in this league. So if anybody in the league can pilot it, it's going to be him. Um, but there are a couple of things that I don't totally understand about the team, but I imagine that you have very good reasons for like Comfey and Shaman. Um, but if you ever try to like, he'll soften you up with a bunch of hazards, and then he'll come in with Iron Bundle at the end and finish you off. Uh, so this team has that fun of being very much a stall team that has the ability to suddenly transition into being very offensive very fast. Um, so I think it's going to be a very challenging team to play against. I think that if you manage to punch a hole in this team, it'll be much easier, but I think that task is going to be pretty challenging. So I looking at it right now, my thought is that you want to come in and you want to try to knock out one of his Pokemon as quickly as possible to make it more difficult for him to try and chip you down so he can clean you out at the end. But it's not going to be super easy. So I think it's a very well put together team. And I think that I don't think it's gonna be very fun to play against. I think it's gonna be
No,
they're gonna be brutal games. Um, so yeah, I think I rated it as second. I think ranking it as first totally makes sense. I think it's gonna do well this season. I have no notes. So I guess that is the end of our power rankings. We will be doing another set of power rankings about halfway through the season once all of the trades have closed, and that will be a second look at the teams. Maybe seeing the changes people made, or maybe there were aspects to the teams that we really missed in our analysis, and we were dead wrong about some of them. Um, and we can't wait to see you guys prove us how wrong we are. Um, if anybody watches this video and is like, "Hey, I want some help with some changes," reach out to any of the three of us. Um, you could also reach out to Tony's very experienced. Winterborn is very experienced. I'm sure either of them could give you a hand in coming up with some changes for your team. Overall, any one of these teams could win. The most important thing is how you pilot the team. So yeah, I'd say great job to everybody on the teams they put together. It's going to be a fun season. We've got a nice mix of experience and newer players, and I'm really looking forward to it. Noah, Monday, do you guys got anything else you wanna add?
bring hazards for Winterborn, please.
Yeah.
Bring defog. That's all I got.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might just bring up full boots and avoid getting knocked off. We'll see how that
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, and just to reiterate, we can definitely help any of you guys out, if you need help, with improving your team. You have until, this will be next Monday when the first game starts, is, a limited trading. And then
Yeah.
you have 5 trays until week 5 after that. So,
Yeah.
plan
Schedule's posted
accordingly.
soon, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, is the schedule posted? Oh, exciting.
All
All
right.
right. See you guys.
Yep. See ya.
See you, everybody.